afternoon, everyone. Good morning if you're on the West Coast. My name is Caitlin Donnelly. I am the Senior Program Director for Nonprofit Vote, and I'm excited to have you all join us for another Nonprofit Vote webinar. This one on the topic of engaging immigrant communities. We have a great agenda for you today and some really great panelists. So I'm going to start by providing some framing about our Nonprofit Power report and this issue specifically, where we focused on immigrant communities and several organizations serving different communities across multiple states. We're going to dive into some best practices that we learned from working with these partners. And then we actually have two representatives of those partners with us today live to answer some questions, have a discussion, and also answer your questions. So when you have a question for our presenter, please put that in the Q&A box. I'm more likely to see it there than in our chat box, which can get really overstuffed. So put those questions there. And for now, we'll get started with some of our slides. All right, so today it's voter engagement in, typo, this will be fixed on the real slides. Voter engagement in immigrant communities. Looks like this is a holdover from one of our last webinars on this topic. On the next slide, we have a little bit about our reports that we're releasing this year. So we are trying to uplift nonprofits doing work in niche spaces and with often overlooked communities. This is a platform for them to tell their stories and uplift their successes. We also want to educate other nonprofits and others who support nonprofit voter engagement work about why it's so important to do voter engagement work with these communities. And every community deserves representation. Finally, we're focused on providing tailored strategies that have been tried and tested by nonprofits. So we want to be a collective hub for those resources, as so many of you look to us for information about voter engagement. And we've heard the requests for, how do we reach different kinds of communities, different kinds of voters that may face additional barriers to voting and different challenges. So this is our opportunity to do that. Next slide, please. So in our previous installment was focused on engaging voters in small towns and rural areas. So that webinar and report is already posted on our website, and we'll include a link in the follow-up, but it explains how rural and small towns are underserved. It really gives us a definition to work with around what is a small town or rural area. And then strategies for engaging voters in those communities. It may look a little different than what is done in a larger city. And then we have profiles on 3 groups doing amazing work in Michigan and Colorado. So this report is really focused on the power of immigrants and immigrant communities. We know that communities of first and second generation immigrants exist all across the country in every single state. These communities really build robust networks of mutual support. Some people in these communities may not have the right to vote. They may not be naturalized yet, or they may not be eligible to become a citizen. But their American-born or naturalized family and friends can vote. And in fact, of the nearly 45 million first-generation immigrants currently living in the United States, 23.2 million are estimated to have been eligible to vote in 2020. So this is not an insignificant part of the electorate whatsoever. When we look at the voting trends among foreign-born voters compared to US-born voters, there is a gap. So the latest data that Pew has that analyzes for US-born versus foreign-born is still looking at the 2016 election, where we saw that 62% of US-born voters turned out to vote, and only 54% of voters who were foreign-born participated in that election. So we're seeing an 8-point gap in the voter turnout rates. And we wanted to look at this gap and also think about how we could narrow it and what are the strategies that are going to make a difference for voters in immigrant communities. Next slide. So why should nonprofits engage? Nonprofits have a critical set of advantages. They have trust with members of their community. There's a mutual respect. And they also often share language, beliefs, cultural attitudes that just makes those relationships stronger. So they make really good messengers to help the community see the importance and benefits of voting. So we're going to get into barriers and strategies, and I want to give a caveat before I dive into this. No two immigrant communities, even if they're maybe from the same countries of origin, no two will be alike. So the strategies and challenges will be different for every community. We spoke to 4 organizations that participated in our 2022 field program. And those organizations served Chaldean Americans, Chinese Americans, Caribbean Americans, and Latin American populations. So that is just a small segment of all the different kinds of immigrant communities and diasporas in this country. So please don't take this as, these as the only barriers, all of the barriers, or the only and best strategies. You know your community best, and we would love to hear your feedback. If you think there's something here that either really doesn't resonate, maybe it resonates for someone else, or if you think there's something missing. So we'd love to hear your feedback. This is our first time putting out a report like this, and we know we are in touch with so many amazing organizations and nonprofit staff and volunteers, many of whom are watching right now. So with that said, here were some of the patterns that we noticed when we talked to these groups. So one pattern and theme that really emerged is a lack of visibility for these communities. They rarely see elected officials, whether on the local, state, or national level, that share their country of origin, their language, or their cultural traditions. So that it's a lack of representation, but it's also a lack of visibility that can really reinforce some concerns or what might be described as disinterest in voting. I try not to use the apathy word because I don't think anyone is truly apathetic about the issues that impact their life. So one strategy that can be really effective here to combat that lack of visibility is to emphasize community power over individual rights. So what that might look like is, instead of using messages that center a single voter and their personal obligation to vote, you might look to messages and programming that really affirms people's cultures and looks at how, by getting the whole community to vote, you can address issues faced by your community and potentially get more representation and really raise your profile and visibility among elected officials. Um, for those of us that are not part of immigrant communities, but maybe our organizations serve people who are immigrants, or there are organizations in our neighborhoods that serve immigrants and we want to partner up. A suggestion for where to start is by just attending events and building relationships with some of the members of those communities, leaders, their own like natural leaders, whether that's a community leader, faith leader, etc. Start by building those relationships, and just approaching this with an eye of learning and wanting to understand who this community is, maybe some of the barriers they face as voters. Language barriers, not surprising, another common issue for voters who are also immigrants. Just over half of immigrants age 5 or older are proficient in English. And I also think that when you have materials translated and in multiple languages, even for voters who maybe can read that English just fine, it's another way to affirm these people's cultural, historical, and linguistic backgrounds. But when you're doing translations for materials, you really want to get it right so that it isn't a waste of time, resources, and a drain on your reputation. So make sure that those are accurate translations, and if at all possible, have a native speaker who understands the context, the idea that you're trying to promote voting or educate people about voting. Make sure that that context and like the way the language is presented resonates there. I know that, at Nonprofit Vote, we've in the past made mistakes about putting out translated materials where the meaning we were trying to get across, it wasn't there. The language was too formal and stiff, and it didn't have the tone that we wanted, and it didn't have the effect that we wanted. And so our partners weren't very interested in using those materials. We can also take into account the platform or the channels we use to spread our messages. A lot of us, may be very active on Facebook, but there are lots of communities where, Facebook isn't that, well used. Maybe the community prefers to use WhatsApp or WeChat or some other platform to communicate with one another. And instead of trying to draw people into another channel, a different channel, go to where they're already having conversation. Many people have unfamiliarity and distrust in the process. That goes for many US-born young Americans. It also is true of many foreign-born and immigrant citizens and potential voters. The voting process can seem really complicated, and in fact, it kind of can be when you think through, there's registration, there's certain documentation you need, and then you go to some completely other place to cast a ballot, or maybe you want to vote by mail. It's a confusing process if you've never been through it before. So it's important to provide really clear information, really patiently. And some communities have been burned by candidates who have come in trying to, get their vote and then getting out of there before ever really addressing the needs of the community or even listening to that community. So you want to invite elected officials in and candidates in so that community members can get to know them and vice versa, and break down some of the fear or distrust that might exist. But make sure you're walking voters through every step of the process. And that is going to often include the process of becoming a citizen. So I'm excited to have our speakers touch more on that piece as well. All right. And The final barrier that we have in this report is that it's true that not every immigrant is going to be eligible to vote or eligible to become a citizen, but it's impossible to tell somebody's citizenship status just by looking at them. So I encourage you to engage with every person, even if they may not be eligible, and even if they tell you they are not eligible, they're still deserving of the information, and they can be a real ally and advocate for the civic process and for voting and helping and encouraging their family members, friends, coworkers, etc., to vote essentially on their behalf. You know, the idea that, you know, while someone may not be able to vote, someone else who is eligible can vote in that person's best interest. Okay, so I'm excited to introduce our panelists and start throwing some questions their way so you can get to know these two amazing individuals and organizations they work for. So our first panelist is Peggy Du. Peggy is the Executive Director and Accounting Manager of the Association of Chinese Americans. Peggy received a Master of Business Administration in Global Leadership from Cleary University and a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration in Accounting from Wayne State University. She was recognized as a game changer during 2022 Asian American and Pacific Island Heritage Month. So that must have been 1 year ago. We're on the last day of AAPI month. By Illich Sports and Entertainment, along with the Detroit Tigers, Red Wings, and Comerica Bank. So quite an honor for Peggy, and she was appointed by the governor to serve as a Michigan Asian Pacific American Affairs Commissioner. Our second panelist today is Stacy Bahri. Stacy is the Strategic Initiatives Manager at Chaldean Community Foundation. During the start of her career at Chaldean Community Foundation, Stacy worked as a caseworker, advocating for her clients and assisting them with acculturating into American society. Today, Stacy leads a team that represents the community outreach and marketing team for the Chaldean Community Foundation. That team is tasked with forming strategic partnerships with the greater community to gain appreciation for the Chaldean Community Foundation and its services. She is involved in several committees that promote various initiatives, including diversity and inclusion, and many more. So I am very excited to have both Peggy and Stacy joining us today. So I invite you both to turn on your cameras, and we will get started. I think, you know, the first thing our audience will want to hear from each of you is just a little bit about yourselves, your organization, and especially the communities that you serve. So why don't we start with you, Peggy?
Good afternoon and good morning, everyone. And like Caitlin has already introduced myself. So now I want to talk a little bit more about my organization, Association of Chinese Americans. So we are established in 1972 in Metro Detroit, and we've been serving the community for over half a century. So we promoted the general welfare of the Chinese Americans and the Asian Pacific Americans community. We provide supporting for education, training, and leadership development of both youth and adults, and improving the health and equity of life, advancing public appreciation of Chinese culture, and we're advocating for a just and equitable society. So through our 3 service centers in Detroit, Madison Heights, and Canton, we serve over 5,000 clients directly each year. We do the daily service and also special events and programs. And like that's our mission to help everybody in local area and the United States.
Thank you, Peggy. Stacy, can you tell us a little bit about your organization and the community you serve?
Yes, thank you, Caitlin, again for having me today, and good morning to those of you on the West Coast, and good afternoon to those of you that are on the East Coast, as I am. For those of you that are unfamiliar with the Chaldean Community Foundation, we are a nonprofit organization located in Southeast Michigan, and we provide social services to the greater community. We established the organization back in 2006, mainly to meet the needs of the incoming refugee population at the time. We provide a number of services that not only serve the Chaldean community, but the greater community at large. In 2022, we served nearly 40,000 individuals from 48 different countries of origin. And our programs and services range from immigration services to career services, educational programming, to services for folks that have a developmental and or intellectual disability. We also have some other services that we provide as well, but an array of services really. And today we are really seen as a true community center that does provide service to, again, anyone that walks through our doors, regardless of race, religion, gender, ethnicity, etc. And it is important for me to also share that about 20% of our clients are non-Chaldean as well.
Thank you. In our conversation that we had a couple of weeks ago, Peggy, you described the beautiful patience and empathy that staff at ACA approached working with especially Chinese speaking, especially elder people, and helping them through the voting process. Can you say a little bit more about language barriers and the importance of language access?
Yes, sure. Our daily service, we have professional social worker to help with clients. And most, I would say half of them have a language barrier. So the English brochure or voting materials is kind of hard for them to understand. So with the help with the National Voting Organization, we got the translated in language brochure to help them. And to us, if we understand the language, it might just like 5 minutes to complete the process. But for our clients, we need to explain a little bit more, especially the first generation immigrants or the elder adults. And they kind of think it's like non-related to them when they just don't understand the language and the content. So I think it's especially important for us to be the liaison at the bridge to help them bridge the language access so that they know what they talk about. And is it related to them or to the families or to the younger generations, so that it will bring out to their attention, like a voter is related to everybody. And our workers and staff are very patient, and because we have our daily services, so we build up the trust between the clients and our organization. So when we're talking to them about this topic, they will willing to stay and listen to us what it means to them and understand more about the topic.
Thank you. And Stacy, you mentioned that citizenship and acculturation is a big part of Chaldean Community Foundation's work. So could you share with us a little bit about how you connect voting to that naturalization process?
Yes, so part of our mission, as you mentioned, our 4 pillars are mainly focused on advocacy, acculturation, community development, and cultural preservation. And one of the ways that we connect citizenship and voting is through our immigration services that we provide. So for folks that are eligible to file for naturalization, our team here that is BIA accredited, we also have an immigration attorney on staff, can assist individuals through that process of filing their applications for naturalization. Once an individual does obtain citizenship, our team here is equipped and is knowledgeable in the voter registration process and can assist those individuals that have obtained U.S. citizenship register to vote. In addition to that, when folks are coming to our office, and we feel that they need a little bit of extra help in preparing for the USCIS examination. And we determine that through our consultation with the individual, we will then refer them to our citizenship preparation courses. These courses are 10 weeks long and they prepare individuals for the USCIS exam. We have a very high success rate with individuals that go through this preparation course. I would say about 97 to 98% of students that go through the 10-week course do go on to obtain U.S. citizenship.
Great. So, sorry, I'm trying to pay attention to my question queue as well. Those barriers are, I think, like very clear and like hard, right? Like language access, if you don't understand what you're reading, that's going to be a barrier. If you're not eligible to vote, that's a big barrier. But I think, there are also the barriers of lack of visibility or distrust of the system, some of the attitudes that voters may hold about the system. And again, we don't just hear about that, those concerns from voters coming from immigrant communities, but from many other communities. I'd like each of you to touch on a little bit about some of the attitudes or the feelings that members of your community have about voting. And if they're not positive feelings, how do you make them more positive? And how do you encourage them? Either of you can start.
Yeah. So I feel like, especially here in Macomb County, we have a large refugee and immigrant community. The community that has been here, since the 60s, maybe even before that, and those that tend to be more established are mainly in Oakland County. I would say those that are in Macomb County are about a generation behind and are still acculturating. And for those that maybe have been here for less than a decade or so and may have had to flee their homeland because of, fear of persecution due to their religious beliefs. Those individuals coming to America were really just in survival mode, right? And they were not eligible, of course, to file for naturalization for the first 5 years that they were here in America, assuming that they arrived as refugees and they were eligible to file at that point. But their initial, they're in survival mode, as I mentioned. So they're not thinking of going out to vote. Also in the old country, they weren't used to having their voices heard. They weren't accustomed to that. So coming to a new country and having to learn not only a new language, but to acculturate into American society is a challenge in itself. So oftentimes things like voting or even healthcare or seeing doctor's appointments, those kind of get put on the back burner because their main goal is really to survive and to help support family members. So the feedback and the attitudes that we see are really from the community that well, it doesn't matter if we vote, it won't make a difference anyway, right? Because they're accustomed to not having their voice heard, or if they do have their voice heard, is that really going to make a difference in the community? Currently, we have, well, according to a study that we conducted back in 2017 with the University of Dearborn, Michigan, and some of their folks, we learned that about 160,000 Chaldeans reside right here in Southeast Michigan. And currently very few hold elected positions. And our hope is that one day we will have more community members hold those elected positions and will represent the community here in Southeast Michigan. And I hope that answers your question, Caitlin.
Yeah, that was great. Peggy, could you also share some of those attitudes that some of the Chinese Americans you're serving have around voting?
Yeah, so when we talk to the Chinese American community, some of people think my vote is not important. That does not count. So I think it's a different of the systems in the voting system in the United States and China, and so like if we don't I would say like how do we communicate with them? Like if you don't vote, if we don't voice for ourselves, who will speak for us? The APA community, and our voice is important. We should have our voice heard. So we starting to educate everybody of voter registration. That's the first step, right? I know not everybody is eligible to vote, but if somebody is eligible, the first part is to register. And then we are talking about the voting process. We also encounter a lot of challenges because they were asked, I don't know which proposal I should choose. I don't know which candidate I should vote for. So that's very important. Like we should engage more like official elections candidate and just to talk to the community. And we will be very happy to be the language support and to help our just constitute understand whom or like to help them understand like they can start to think about that. And because people think, wow, it's like a very time consuming to do the voter registration, or like take me a lot of time to get off the work and to do the voting. And no matter what I did, it doesn't count. So that's kind of what they think. But it's not a reality. So I think doesn't count people who are not eligible, the senior citizens. I think we should encourage everybody and like even the younger generation when they are turned to the age to be able to vote. Vote is important. So because like I said before, like we need to voice out to representing our communities. If we just stay quiet and nobody will care about us. So if we don't vote for ourselves, but think about the future generations and think about like changing now and the future. And we encourage everybody to engage in this process.
Thank you. I encourage our listeners to add their questions to the Q&A box. There's one that I think is a nice follow-up to that last question. Denise is asking, who is a good messenger, or who is listened to in your community? So do you have ideas on certain people or types of positions that might make good messengers to your communities about voting?
I can start. I would say that certainly the Chaldean Community Foundation is definitely seen as one trusted resource in the community. We are here to educate folks about the voter registration process and really encourage voter registration, civic engagement, and help individuals understand the process. As I mentioned earlier, our team is knowledgeable and equipped and can offer that support to individuals, but also community leaders are often trusted folks that the community will trust if they are, encouraging voter registration. Those could be, anyone from our clergy to community leaders like presidents of organizations, et cetera, that are really seen as the trusted folks in the community.
All right, I think I can say for MAPAC, Michigan Asian Pacific American Affairs. So we are here and we are just to hear the concern issues and suggestions from the community, and then as a liaison to deliver the message to the governor, to the state. And also as my organization, Association of Chinese Americans, and I think there's a lot more other organizations representing the APA community. So we all have direct contact with our clients and our community members. So we are trustworthy to be communicate and being a good platform and to let the people communicate through our channel. And I think also it's important or very it would be an efficient channel to do a town hall, like if we can invite a lot of different candidates, or like even has other people to talk about, to let people different people understand their the proposals, the good stuff, and like the plans, so people can just get familiar with this. It's not like Lansing's our capital. It's like far away, and like we just live here, and like this nothing related to my life. It won't be changed. So I think we need to listen more and participate more and just know more about that.
And then now I'll ask sort of an inverse question. What organizations or who do you all trust to provide information or get assistance with, especially any state-based partners? And I'll, go full transparency that Stacy and Peggy are both partners of Nonprofit Vote and Michigan Nonprofit Association. So you don't have to say us, but are there other sort of like groups that you look to that help support your voter engagement work and strengthen it? So Peggy, I think you mentioned MAPAC, but are there any other groups?
That's a good question. So I think that's for Michigan, and I think our audience come from all the other like West Coast, East Coast, and I think they are all like lots of 501c3. So obviously like we're nonprofit, like we don't endorsement any candidates. So that's be sure it's like a safe place. And if you're seeking help for the voter registration process, or want to know any of the information, like those nonprofits, the local organization would be like happy to provide the resources and language support and text support if necessary.
Stacy, are there any groups that you work with?
Certainly, we, of course, as you mentioned, we are partners of Nonprofit Vote and work with M&A, with the Michigan Nonprofit Association, every year. In addition to our daily voter engagement work, we've also worked with other groups such as APIA Vote, and we've partnered together on various events to help educate the broader community about voter registration And of course, our local partners, the city clerk's office, the county clerk's office, are always very supportive and resourceful when we need them. Just to give you an example of some work that we've done, we host an annual citizenship celebration, and we really take this opportunity to celebrate our new Americans, those folks that have not only gone through our citizenship preparation course, or maybe have filed their N-400 or N-600 through our office and went on to obtain U.S. citizenship. We invite them back every year for an annual event to celebrate, because that is a huge accomplishment and certainly something worth celebrating for these individuals. We usually invite the city clerk's office here in our local city of Sterling Heights, along with the city mayor, and they come out and they not only offer resources to individuals, such as bringing out a tabulator, a sample ballot, some information for individuals to really understand the voter process and just how to go out to the polls. You know, having that tabulator there is so important, because for some, they've never seen it before, right? And just understanding how to insert the ballot, that could be challenging, how to fill it out. So we work with the city and our local partners on an annual basis to host events similar to our citizenship celebration.
You answered a question without me even having to ask it. Someone asked about what local governments and election boards can do better to engage with your community groups. So Stacy, you gave a lot of great ideas, especially around the tabulator. Peggy, are there things that you're doing with your local election board, or things that you think might be helpful in your community or other communities?
Yeah, so I would say like our office in the Oakland County is a welcoming county. So each year we celebrate the Welcome Week, as well as the city of Detroit. So that shows an attitude from the government and the officials, like how they welcome us, like values our inputs and values and efforts, and also want to collaborate with the different local communities. So when they show up in different our outreach event, for example, we have a few cultural events like the Lunar New Year celebration, and this month on the AAPR Heritage Month, and the government officials show up to show their supports, and they have a chance, and the community members can talk with them and see, okay, we are welcome. So like when they meet in person with more, and they know like okay, so we are kind of related, we are living in the America, and like we can just know who we elected and who like they're a real person. They talk to you, and so it's just like people politicians in the TV show or something. That's really make a change.
All right, thank you. We got a question. I think I asked each of you this question in the interviews, but I would like to hear your answers. We'll start with you, Stacy. What do you say to someone who is not eligible to vote because of their status, but who still wants to engage in civic life?
So for someone that is not eligible to vote, we still encourage them to, you know, encourage others that are eligible to vote to really go out and participate, to be civically engaged, and really to help them understand that our voice matters and having representation in the community matters. So I think that when you educate individuals on the importance of that civic engagement and how your voice can make a difference, it really does help folks and encourages them to go out and vote and to exercise their rights and their voice to be heard.
So in our community, and I know we know someone is not eligible, but we live in the community. We all have our families and friends. So through the like the power of the amount of word, they know like ACA and our organization or the other organization, they can help people who want to vote or who wants to complete the voter registration come to our office, and we can help them doing the process and provide the language support. So it's important just to keep emphasizing and like deliver the message to everybody, like get out to vote.
Great. Okay, I think we have a time for just a couple more questions. One is about resources. What sort of resources, especially in the apps or software, have you used for collecting voter outreach data for, program improvement, GOTV? I feel bad asking you this question because I do know the answer.
So as far as apps that we use to collect data, we don't necessarily use any apps to collect data, but we do partner, as I mentioned, with the Michigan Nonprofit Association, and typically they provide a unique link to the organization that we include on our website. We have a page, a landing page on our site that is all about voter registration. It also has a button that links back to voter registration application. And through that unique link, I believe the organization is able to, not our organization, but MNA is able to obtain some information to see how many folks actually visited and how many took action using that link. Does that answer your question, Caitlin?
It does perfectly, yes. So for anyone considering, low-cost tools they can use, in our programs, we use Linktree. It's very easy to set up. It's very easy for clients to use. And it is very low cost. And in fact, Linktree will provide premium accounts to nonprofits. So any nonprofit who wants to set up a page similar to what ACA has and what Chaldean Community Foundation has and Michigan Nonprofit Association, it's pretty easy. And we're also going to be putting out some sort of guidance and training around how to do that and some of the links that you might want to include. But you don't need to wait for us to get that guidance out, if you want to get started right away. And those link trees have the helpful QR codes. And yep, you can see all the back-end data to get a sense of, are your social media posts reaching people versus is in person working really well? You might know the difference between if they're using like the QR code versus the link. First clicking the link. I do want to get one more question from the audience before we start wrapping up for the day. Someone asked, what is the best way to find out or ask someone who's an immigrant if they are eligible to vote without making them nervous to divulge their immigration status? And this is a question we're getting on this webinar. It's also one I've heard many times before. So I'm sure there are many people with this question in the back of their mind. And either of you can take a swing.
Yeah, I think just instead of just asking directly if you're eligible to vote, we introduce like who is eligible to vote. And we can say like, do you know like if you meet this criteria, like you are eligible to vote, and are you interested to know more about that or something? So just to start a conversation and to let them know, hey, they may think, okay, I reached the age and the immigration status, like I can vote, and like there's a benefit of voting, so that we can just continue to have the deeper conversation. But especially in the immigrants community, I know it's very challenging because they think it's just like very serious things like what is the consequence if I vote, or like I don't vote, or something. And sometimes they are not eligible. So if we just ask directly, if ask them if you are eligible or not, they will be nervous or like feel don't comfortable. But if we instead let them know if you meet certain criteria, you are eligible to vote. Do you want to know more about that? I kind of give them an option to say yes or no if they want to proceed or like getting to know more about that. Yeah, I hope this answers helps.
No, that's a great tactic. Stacy, what do you think?
I agree with Peggy's approach, and not being an immigrant myself, I was going to say that just ask if they're a U.S. citizen. I think that I don't think that there was anything wrong with that. Through our intake form here at the organization, we ask individuals what their immigration status is. We ask those questions. So I think being direct, but not assertive or aggressive is okay. We ask questions like, are you an eligible voter? How old are you? If they are eligible, and if they are a US citizen, they're not a registered voter, then that's an opportunity for us not only to educate them about the importance of registering to vote, but also through that intake process, we're able to help them get registered to vote because we're asking those direct questions that sometimes may seem like they're not appropriate, but I think that they're necessary.
I think it probably has a lot to do with context. And, Stacy, you were a caseworker, those were probably the kinds of direct questions you were asking in any way. So why switch up the approach? But especially if you are, don't already have a trusting relationship, maybe Peggy's approach of just outlining the requirements for eligibility and then letting them opt in or out to the conversation, that might be a good approach for that kind of scenario. You've both given us really great ideas and perspectives. With our last remaining few moments, I just want to give you each an opportunity to give a final word. If there's anything any wisdom you'd want to impart about your community, about working with immigrants, the importance of voting, just you each get a minute to just have the floor, and whatever you want to promote or discuss.
Okay, I guess I can start. Well, first off, I just want to say thank you again for the opportunity to be here today. And thank you to all who have joined and listened in for this past hour. Something that I would just like to leave everyone with is that I believe that trust is important to every single one of us on this call. I especially think that trust is important in the immigrant community. So establishing trust and also understanding differences is very important. A lot of the work that we do is to advocate for those that don't really have a voice or are unable to advocate for themselves. For most of the folks that we're working with, English is not their primary language. It might not even be their second language. It might be their third language. So also having access to materials that these individuals can read and understand in their own language is important. And a lot of the work that we've done is to help advocate for that. And we've been fortunate enough to, be able to get that information translated in the language that our community understands, and to be able to distribute to them as well.
I want to share with our folks online. I think there are some other nonprofit organizations I think we should just use every opportunity to reach out to the community members. Like not only the daily in-person services, also some outreach events. And each time we just set up a booth for our outreach event. So we ask people to just look at the brochures we prepare, like for the voter information, and so like maybe like they're busy focusing on their other parts of the life and work, but at the event, and they probably are willing to spend 1 or 2 minutes at our booth. At that time, we've been able to tell them some really important messages. So our voice matters. We should be seen, be heard, and like we should advocate for ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Peggy and Stacy and everyone who joined us for the webinar today. We're going to log off, but next week you will receive the recording, slides, and related materials for this webinar. If you enjoyed yourself today, if you learned something, please take 1 minute to fill out the survey that will pop up on your screen once the webinar ends. So once again, thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your Wednesday. Happy end of Asian American Pacific Islander Month, and we will see you at our next webinar.